Thank you, Karen. All right, well, I thought I would start off with a brief explanation of shamanism for people, because a lot of people don't know what a shaman is, including shamans sometimes. Anyway, originally the word came from a tribe in Siberia, and we're going back thousands of years here. The tribe were called the Tungus, and the original word was Saman, which is S-A-M-A-N, and it meant one who is excited, moved, or raised. A person regarded as having access to and influence in the world of spirit. A tribal healer, often using trances and rituals to reach altered states of consciousness. Many countries have and still have had spiritual traditions that run along the same lines but have a different name and might be ascribed to, you know, as a medicine man or woman, but it's the same basic core things. There's a diversity of actual methods of attaining a spiritual aid. So you might have people who use mind-altering substances. Personally, not great for me. I wouldn't go there, but it's part of some cultures and it's a very popular thing in today's world. Other tools for altering consciousness are dancing and drumming, chanting, fasting, things along those lines. Shamans have spirit guides, as a medium would have spirit guides. Shamans get a little bit of added help in. We have totems, animals that help us, and we have a lot of help in spirit generally and in nature. So shamans really aware of nature around them and the consciousness in all life. Some shamans will also function traditionally as the lawmakers of a tribe, because they're expected to have that sort of wisdom from the spirit world, or a spiritual leader similar to a priest or priestess. Virtually every culture has had a spiritual practitioner, and shamanism was pretty much right back there as a foundational thing. Western shamanism, the training will usually follow a Northern American Indian tradition, and sometimes the Druid or Celtic practice. Neo-shamanism, so modern day shamanism or urban shamanism it's sometimes called, arose as an alternative spirituality in the West during the 60s and 70s, when people were exploring non-Western religions and looking for different sorts of cultures and spiritual beliefs. Two significant fathers of neo-shamanism were Carlos Castaneda, I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but he's in the references, and Michael Harner. Both of them were anthropologists who undertook training with Indigenous teachers in explorations of non-ordinary reality, and non-ordinary is probably a great way of just looking at the whole thing. Both wrote books about their experiences. Both were remarkable men. Michael Harner's only recently passed. He's been a fabulous shamanic master, really. Shaman's become a sort of generic word in the modern world that encompasses the core similarities found in spiritual or magical practices of ancient traditions. So it's morphing, it's a changing thing, it's expanding its own foundations. Briefly, what does a shaman offer society? Well, healing, physical, you know, everyone goes for physical. Sometimes healing is acceptance of a physical state and not having anxiety and fear around it. So healing it's an emotional thing and it's a spiritual thing. For a shaman, spirit's sort of the core thing. So if you're healing the spirit, then everything else should flow all right, if you're breaking through the spiritual barriers and beliefs. Okay. We sort of provide, a modern shaman really can provide a conscious framework that gives meaning and understanding to events in individual lives and in the community, and hence globally. Incredibly able to make sense of the exceedingly expanding chaos in our global community at the moment. And that's why there does seem to have been a rebirth in shamanism. Most importantly, a shaman provides a safe and validating space to people who've had a non-ordinary experience, Western materialism just junks nearly every non-ordinary experience. We've been the butt of many a joke and a lot of, you know, unpleasantness, really. And so a shaman offers a place where you can talk about that and share it, and they can shine light on it and validate it. It's in a massive sort of offering to any individual who needs help with perhaps having had one non-ordinary experience and no framework to place it in. So shamans also facilitate the expansion of consciousness. For me, this is a prime shamanic tool, and that's through dream work. You know, everybody in every culture dreams. Whether they remember them or not, it's happening. It is a prime tool for helping us that materialism has virtually wiped from our consciousness. It's so important, and it easily yields such great gifts when you pay attention to it. And shamanic work is really, for me, about attention and intention. So what else can shamans do? We demonstrate that beliefs aren't not necessarily the truth, right? So, because we will walk in non-ordinary realms, and beliefs can be a real barrier to that. So, yeah. Oracle offerings, perhaps, and in terms of like an oracle isn't, or even a prophecy, isn't necessarily about the future. It's about divine truth. So shamans have that tool from spirit. They can be very good pipes for that, as can a good medium, a channeler. So you can begin to already understand that this is a word that we're already accepting in other areas, but it has a few extra things to offer, perhaps. If you're talking about non-ordinary things, so storytelling, which is another thing that I do, it's laying a foundation for people of a live, loving, interactive universe in the hearts of anybody who wants to listen. So you're really expanding that. All right, enough about my brief explanation of shamanism, and I shall get on to what's happened to me a bit. I have always been clairaudient as long as I can remember. It's just been part of my life. Before I started school, I remember hearing voices and asking my mother about it. And she was obviously must have had her own moments, because she just told me to, if I heard someone calling me, to just stay quiet, stand still, and close my eyes and say, yes, I'm listening. So it was a little bit out of the norm. However, when I was very, very little, I had a repetitive dream about something large and green waiting to get me, watching me and waiting to get me. So if we fast forward to when I'm about 10 or 11, I had what is really a shamanic initiation event, a global shattering of my worldview. Shamans also are expected to have an understanding about death, a very great understanding about death. And it's probably one of the reasons I'm always attracted to near-death experiences, which I have not had. Death can also mean the death of your comprehension of reality. And that's what happened to me when I was around about 11, when I was out in a sunny afternoon in a paddock with a friend, and it was a very steep paddock surrounded by natural forest, beautiful spot. And she was down the bottom of the paddock, and we were sort of vaguely making our way home. I was getting towards the halfway mark when I realised I was looking not that far ahead of me at a large green leg. And I stopped still. You know, it's not what you expect to see in your field of vision. In the 1960s, I'm an older lady now. We're going back to a little girl. There was no talk in those times in Australia of reptilian aliens, I can assure you. So I'm looking at this huge green leg and really being impressed by the muscular tone to it. It had a boot on. I can remember he had boots on, and it went over his knee, and I had not seen that before either, and I didn't think it was done as it ought to have been done. I don't quite remember why not. Anyway, I continued very carefully moving my eyes up this green leg, which is sensible in my opinion. I didn't sort of take it all in at once. I just kept looking up and got to the chest area, and that sort of for me is when I dispute that this could possibly have been an hallucination, because I think that there was a structure across that chest which my brain had no comprehension or comparison to. It just simply did not, in today's terminology, compute. I did not know whether I was looking at skin or something over the skin. We were still green. Everything was green. He was holding something in his right arm. And so I sort of stopped there for a while trying to work it out, and my brain literally gave a shrug and went, I just don't know. I don't know what this is. I've got nothing here. So I kept going up, and it was when I hit his eyes that he realised that I could see him. And the eyes were, we actually don't have that colour, but it was sort of a mix of orange and gold. And he had the full reptilian, diamond-shaped iris. It was, as I said, that was when he realised that I could see him. Until then, he thought he was invisible. So I've been told later that at that moment he would have had to have opened a channel into my mind, which is exactly what happened. He spoke directly into my mind. And the first thing he did was to reassure me that he had no intention of hurting me, that it was a great big mistake. I had not been able to, I should not have been able to see him. He was as horrified in that transaction that I could see him as I was, because, gosh, there was nothing that would prepare a child of 11 in Australia for seeing that. He'd been watching us play. That's what he told me. He'd just been watching us play. And I was so wrapped. This is also something that near-death experiences will describe, that time stops. When we made eye contact, time stopped. There aren't ways to explain what that feels like as a sensation. It's an amazing sensation to have just time stop. At some point, he must have just let go of my mind, and I sort of heard my friend still playing, walking along, talking to herself down the bottom of the paddock, and I slid my eyes sort of sideways to go, hey, can you see this? But she had her head down. She never saw him, and I slid my eyes back to him. He'd disappeared. There was nowhere he could have gone. He'd have had to have been going breakneck speed to meet the trees, and that was that. I was a bit of a goody-goody. My sister always informed me, and I was truthful as a child. So my family accepted that something weird had happened, and Dad thought he might have been a yowie, but informed me they should be hairy. He didn't have a hair on his body, so that didn't work. And it just stayed there because, and it's looking back in life, is you realise that shattered everything. I knew at that point that we weren't the most perfected species in the universe. This thing could turn itself invisible, talk straight into my head, and its form was stunningly crafted, humanoid. So anyway, that was the beginning, really. And from there, I'm going to have to speed up, or I am going to run out of time. I've had an enormous amount of non-ordinary experiences across a raft of areas: psychic stuff, mediumistic stuff. I'm a lucid dreamer, precognitive dreams, out-of-body experiences, heightened intuition. It's just been part of my life, and it's everyday part of my life still. Because of the clairaudience, more than anything probably, it's still very there. In 2009, I'm really fast forwarding now, I'm leaving out heaps, but 2009, Spirit said to me, we want you to write a book about, just get down some of the major stuff that's happened in a book, which I did do. It's a very badly written book. However, it's available and it's in the list. And I couldn't understand why until my cousin sent round an email in 2010 looking for people to go to a shamanic event with her in Hawaii. And I had no interest in this particular shamanic person. I'd been lent a book and didn't finish it, wasn't interested. But I was very interested in spending a fortnight with my cousin, whom we hadn't had a lot to do with each other since we were little. So I thought, righto, I'm off, I'll go. And off I tootled, unsuspecting, not interested, thinking, oh, well, the meditation will be fun. And when we got there and we walked into the room, it was literally like I had come home. I felt like I knew everybody. And some amazing things happened in that time. Yeah, gosh. In fact, probably one of the biggest things that happened there was I actually had a vision, which wasn't part of any led meditation. It was just a spontaneous vision where the entire room was packed out with my cousin and myself, with all of our ancestors. There's this just enormous spirit body, and standing at the front was her father. And I heard a voice say, "The clan has 2 children present," with such pride. And here's me, know nothing about shamanism, not interested. Yeah, and I'm sort of thinking, Scotland, what are they doing here? You know, I'm not realising it was an actual spiritual clan I was looking at. Because I'm going to go back just a titch and say that I had spent 20 years studying the works of a man named Murdo MacDonald Bain, whom I came across quite early in life. And he's a fabulous spiritual teacher, particularly 2 books. I've given the website. Everything he's ever done is available for free download. You don't have to purchase it. You can just download it. If you started off with the book Beyond the Himalayas, you'll be good. I found it in the travel section in a little bookshop out in the middle of nowhere, and it was like it lit up. It made just total sense to me. But Murdo MacDonald Bain always taught that you don't need anything between you and divinity. You don't need a structured religion. You certainly don't need ceremony and dogma and form. And I've been doing this for 20 years, right? So all of a sudden I'm getting this enormous pressure in 2010 to undertake a spiritual apprenticeship. And it's horrifying to me. I don't want to do it because I've spent 20 years saying I don't need to do ceremony, get lost. I don't need that. I can talk to God, you know, what I call God, which is the whole universe, a divine consciousness. I don't need to do this. The pressure was enormous until one day I was on a walk at home arguing. Like, I just kept arguing with them. I don't want to do this. What's the point of having studied that I don't need all of this? And I went on this walk, and literally it was raining crow feathers. I mean, there was no body. I was walking for blocks. Everywhere I went, there was oodles of crow feathers. It was amazing. And I knew I had to join up, so I did. First 6 months, I was still kicking and screaming. I did not want to be there. However, I had a dream of Murdo MacDonald Bain, and he told me, and he said to me in this dream, the reason you needed to know that you didn't need all of those things was so you use them correctly. And it made such sense, because it meant that I didn't give my power to a tool, to a ceremony. I just focused my power, and I got shamanically assisted in intensifying that power. There's a great danger in religions, as we all know, and obviously in shamanism too, that we give our power away to the peripheral stuff that's meant to actually focus power. And you can get lost down that rabbit hole real fast. So I'd had a pretty good training in how to use shamanic tools, and how to ask them to be part of that was part of the training too. And of course, I guess I should mention, anyway, I kept on doing shamanism. I love it. Okay, there's a lot of people who say to you a shaman isn't a shaman if they say they're a shaman. There's all sorts of different beliefs about what it is. It's simply having a relationship with a living, conscious and loving universe, and knowing how to set your intent, to choreograph energy in a positive manner, for influencing things, for finding answers to things, for understanding, for comprehension, and for expanding your own loving self, I suppose. In the end, it becomes a really deep understanding of the one life in all life. You know, there is no separation. If I could give you the core teaching for me of a whole lifetime of amazing different things, it would be that we don't actually have connections. You know, we're all about connections in the modern world. How everything's a web and it's all connected, and there might be a web as such, but I woke up one day and a voice said, intelligent beings don't have connections. And I realised it meant that we're all the one life. It isn't a connection. We're all part of a infinite diversity is fine. It's an infinite diversity of the one life, and it's in everything. It's why a shaman can talk to a rock, and I do, because consciousness, you could say like my table doesn't have consciousness, but consciousness has my table. Can you understand how that twists around so that people can go suddenly hear, oh, well, I need to get my brakes tested. It's because consciousness is flowing through the atomic structure, the void in the atomic structure of the entire material realm. That's what I've learned. Now, near-death experiences often mention that on the other side, they know everything and it's so simple a child could understand it. And pretty much that's why, in my opinion. What they understand is everything is the one thing, but in infinite diversity. It's an amazing universe. I like to keep my stuff really short and simple because the core teaching of shamanism for me is to try and, I don't know, put little cracks, into the egg of materialistic patterning so that a little bit of light can shine through and people can look at things in a different perspective and maybe open themselves up to things that are different. I eventually came across, whilst I was doing shamanism, I came across Bruce Lipton and, oh gosh, what's that name? It's Williams, but I can never remember his Christian name, Robert Williams as well, which is all about beliefs. Bruce Lipton's about the biology of belief with his book, and that the beliefs, what we choose to believe forms our reality. That's in the Bible. As you believe, so shall it be unto you. It's so true. But when you start to chip away at beliefs that don't actually enhance your life or the life of the community or the life of the whole planet, it's an amazing process. So I'd always recommend Bruce Lipton, and I'd always recommend Robert Williams and his process of Psych K, which is an actual physical process of changing belief systems for people. So I came across that, and I also came across, God bless him, a man called Professor John Mack. Now, if nobody's met him or knows of him, get on YouTube. This guy was a legend. He's gone now, unfortunately. But in the early 1990s, he was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, for one thing, but he was also held the chair of psychiatry at Harvard. He was in the top of his field. And he was approached by a well-known person in the UFO sort of community to do a study on, I think he did, his original study was on about 50 people who had repetitive alien abduction experiences. And I did hear him say somewhere along the line that he pretty much thought, I'll soon sort this out. And to his credit, admitted that he could not. He did this study and came up with some amazing stuff that, for me, I read this book when I was doing shamanism, so I was already there. He talks in his work about, at some point he realised that people who had these lifelong experiences end up being called to shamanism. Isn't that fascinating? They go to shaman, they're interested in it. Okay, and I find that fascinating because I wasn't called to shamanism, but boy, it came hunting me with a big stick. So there's obviously some sort of cohesive pattern in this training of alien abduction, etc. And he also said that he found near-death experiences and UFO experiences to have primarily the same pattern. And from there I got on to Now I've lost my place here, Karen.
That's
Oh,
okay. That's okay. You're nearly at half an hour
yeah,
anyway.
I'm nearly at half an hour. I also got onto a Facebook group called the Contact Modalities, right? And this was actually used to be called Free, and it was started by Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut, who became an astronaut of inner space as well as outer space. A fascinating man in his own right, just amazing. Now, they did a study that they duplicated now for Kenneth Ring's book, which was the Omega Project, and he took a statistical study comparing 100 near-death experiences with 100 UFO contact experiences, and they repeated it, but with nearly 4,000 people across the globe who'd had alien, in particular, non-human intelligent contact. And it was fascinating. They duplicated all his results, right? So what the results, I'll just run through them really quickly for you, strongly increased in people who had this pattern, so near-death and UFO alien contact, concern with spiritual matters, desire to help others, compassion for others, my appreciation of the ordinary things in life, ability to love others, tolerance of others, insight into the problems of others, concern with the welfare of the planet Earth, understanding of what life is all about, concern with ecological matters, conviction that there is life after death. All of them, yeah, the same result. Strongly decreased was concern with material things, interest in organised religion, I'd never had, fear of death, and desire to become a well-known person. Okay, so it's a fascinating little study. You know, it's an amazing book, which I would highly recommend once again. So perhaps I should stop and people can ask questions.
Well, I'll kick it off, Kim. A lot of people call themselves shamans. How do I know I'm really dealing with a shaman when I first see them? How do I know that
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, you know, as I said, there are people who would say if they're calling themselves shamans, they're probably not, but I don't know that I'd go along with that. I do understand why people say that, though, which I'll just veer into that. And that's because, for me, shaman is not so much an occupation as a state of being. So it's not, yeah, which is probably where that concept comes from. How would you know whether they're a shaman? Well, there's the same way you do with a good doctor. You know, you ask people who've seen them is one thing. I'm always wary of people who charge an enormous amount of money for any practice, actually, and that would go with this as well. If they're trying to sell you something, you know, be careful. Just stand back and evaluate it. It's pretty much the same as any other type of, you know, you've got your good ones and you've got people who have jumped on the wagon and done a week's training, and that's not going to work well for you. So find out a bit about their history. How did they get where they are? What's there? You know, ask them questions. Ask them questions. Have them written down before you see them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. That's very, very interesting. It's really good to have more information about shamanism, because most people that I know or that even say they're shamans don't explain, as you have recommended to us that we look at for evaluation. I'd like to ask, though, for you to give us whatever information you can about something that came up in another one of my Zoom groups. And it's almost like I'm getting a sense of timing that is very interesting, that you mentioned about, let's see, I don't want to use the word alien, and I don't know what to use. I'm sorry, I really don't have, I can't speak intelligently, but someone mentioned in another Zoom group about the coming of or the melding of or receiving information from those that are in another realm that come down to visit with us. So I'm just wondering if you could just kind of shed a little bit more light about that. Both of you have really sparkled my interest, and I'm just kind of going, oh, more.
Okay. Well, look, I could say, Pat, that the original alien that I met or saw, obviously, I believe, had been there for a long time. He continued to be there because once he'd made that link with me, I could actually, now this is very hard to explain, but feel him in my head. So I knew when he was in the area and when he wasn't. And I think I've said previously, I sort of look at it and think it's a bit like people who go and study gorillas or something. You know, they come here and maybe study us. Like, we're pretty self-destructive species. They must wonder why we're like that. But they've been part of culture, particularly reptilian aliens have been mentioned in history for a very long time. You know, we're going back, it's a long time. So they've been around a long time. Yes, I think there's a lot of interdimensional work is what you're saying. Yeah, they don't always come in craft. And look, I've seen plenty of UFOs. I mean, I haven't got time to say all of the things around alien stuff. You know, I've had your classic abduction sort of scenario and all the rest of it. However, for me, if you're going over a long space of time, and we're talking here, you know, half a century I've been doing these things. So although I love talking, you know, what craft was it and, you know, what alien was it, it's actually not the focus. The focus for me really pretty early on was that it was a spiritual focus.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's about trying to assist this planet and those on it, us, to widen our consciousness, begin to understand the reality of life and drop this sort of materialistic paradigm that's causing so much strife across the world. Does that help at all?
Excellent. Yes, thank you so much. One more little thing, and let me just ask you to consider, excuse me, do you find yourself talking to your spiritual partner, you know, maybe speaking, whether in dreams or however? Is that a way of communication, or is it just more visionary and from within your thoughts?
Okay, they're definitely not my thoughts. I am clairaudient, so I can actually be thinking myself and almost miss it, like it's another voice that comes in. You have to sort of, yeah, and sometimes it's really loud and it's there. Occasionally it's exterior to myself over time. I do have visions as well, but I'm very much a clairaudient, yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Kim, if somebody's interested in learning more about shamanism, in actually going into some kind of training course, where would you recommend that they start looking?
That's a fabulous question, Wendy, because I don't know that I'd do some reading before I did anything else. I really would. I'd look at some of the different shamanic teachers that are around. So if you just did a Google, you'd get some of the bigger names, and then read some of what they've written, see what feels right for you. Really look around. Do your research before you get involved in any of them, because most of those well-known ones will be charging. They'll be charging for this, and they'll be charging a lot. And I've just already said, be careful of being, you know, but I did pay a lot too. It's a sort of different modality than your individual shaman healer, where I am wary of anyone charging a great deal for that. Yeah, really. Research, do some research, do a lot of reading.
What was the structure of the course that you did? How long did it go for, and how often did you meet?
I had to go to America a couple of times a year. In between time, I had a mentor, and it was a 4-year-long course. For me, it was more like a finishing school. I think I said to Karen the other day, it's been putting a bit of polish on there and giving me a few tools that I didn't realise I had. And yeah, fabulous experience though. Things that I think during that time I discovered, there's the big questions, who am I? What am I? Why am I? Well, all of those were pretty much taken care of in my first year. So, and I understood that I'd written that first little booklet in 2009 because everything was going to ramp up once I did the shamanistic training that I was being forced to do, and it did. It's a constant now.
Do you see clients, Kim? Is this part of your work?
Wendy, I run groups. I don't often, perhaps, as I said, shamanism is a way of being, so that seeing clients just becomes, to me, this is for me, how I go about my ordinary life. It's about seeing somebody on the train who might need to talk, or smiling when someone's down. We can all do those things, but they're shaman things, remembering the one life, remembering to be kind and compassionate, to be aware of your surroundings. So yes, I do run groups. I run dream groups, and I run co-facilitate Death Cafe, because, as I said, shamans are meant to have a fair bit to do with taking away the fear of death.
It seems to me from what you've said, Kim, that dreaming is a very important part of being a shaman. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, Karen, for me, it's absolutely a core thing. Yeah, because it's something everybody's got available to them, and you're in an altered brain state. So there's immediate. So when I hear people say that their deceased loved one's deceased child has come to them in a dream, and it's been so clear and so wonderful, and then they've woken up and gone, oh, it's just a dream, it makes me want to scream. I'm sorry, that word, just a dream, it's like, no, this is a person who's got through to you. This is a gift. Honor it. So dreams, like any other muscle, if you honor it, keep using it, pay attention, do the exercise, keep a journal, talk about them, look at them, think about them, give thanks for them. They do wonders back. It doesn't take a lot. The universe is like champing at the bit to get to us. It's about, letting it do. Yeah, letting it come in, inviting it in, saying, please help me to be a better person, to be more aware, to be more kind.
Hi, Ken. I got in a little late, so I apologize if you already answered this question, but I'm curious to know if there's anything in the spirit, any entities that you're are unfriendly, or if you believe in protection and that sort of thing. Like, what do you do, and what do you recommend to people and students beginning mediumship?
Okay. Well, I have been asked to study mediumship, but never got round to it. But I certainly can perform the core role there. I do put protection around myself, and I do encourage people to. In all truth, Gretchen, I would say that there can really only be the one consciousness. However, infinite diversity means that perhaps those of us that continue to make choices that are not life-affirming, we dissipate, and so we can turn into pretty unpleasant beings. So yes, there are things that have no idea that just around the corner is this huge light waiting, full of an incredible love. They don't know it's there, and so they're still lost in a belief in their own separation from that, and can perform unpleasant things as a result of that. Yeah, so I do put protection, and that same protection can be really handy in a physical sense. If I go on an aeroplane, I'll put how I do it, which is a visual thing actually. If I can't get it round there, I have an arrangement with the entire family. We don't go on the flight even if we paid for it. And that's happened twice. And in both times the plane did not take off. So I was right. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So you visualize
Yeah, I do a golden light. If I'm after
a
protection,
golden light.
a lot
Okay.
of people will go for white, but I was trained very early that it's gold.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for a fantastic presentation. Hopefully we can have you on Sydney IANS sometime when you're up there. It'd be great to get your contact details. You
Okay.
write them on the screen on the side.
Yeah. I
I'm
know.
Sorry, I'm interested in your definition of aliens because it seems to spread beyond what I would have expected. When you were giving that definition, I was seeing some of the beings of light that I've seen from time to time and thinking, oh, so in Kim's way of looking at things, that would be an alien. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, maybe alien's just it's a very alienating word, isn't it? It creates a separation. I was right there, alien in alienating. Maybe just non-human. But even that, if you look at the Sufi definition of human, you've got Hu is God and man is supposed to come from Manus, which is ancient Greek, which meant mind. So what are we? We're God-mind being. They're God-mind being too. One of the popes was asked about, what about aliens? And he said, well, they're God's children too. Isn't that gorgeous from a pope? Yeah, alien just means not in this particular meat wagon, Yeah, then we've got to come up with a better word, really, don't we? So non-ordinary, non-humanoid, but they are humanoid. So quite often I have met like an insect-like alien being. Yeah, so it's really just, as this planet is filled with different species, like countless, so is the universe. It's just another aspect of the one great diversity, isn't it? It's all there. It's all happening at once in the one spot, more or less. Yeah, fascinating. Yeah. In fact, if you look at quantum physics, that really is catching up to shamanism, in my opinion, finally. Yeah.
Indeed.
I have a question, but again, because I came so late to the party, I'm probably speaking out of school a bit.
No, go for it.
All righty. Kim, right? I've lost Kim's face, but Kim, you can hear me all right?
I can.
Okay. So I'm interested in what you spoke of a moment ago, where we know in a broad sweeping sense, there is the one consciousness, and we're all fractals of that one source.
Mm.
And so I understand, I can wrap my head around that, but sometimes I'm challenged with the, I don't really like the idea of just, I'm giving this as an example. So if there's an ocean, and that ocean is all consciousness, and then we take a eyedropper and we take a drop out of that ocean, and that drop is me.
Mm.
And then I live my life and I finish living my life, and you drop me back into the ocean where there's no delineation. I know I'm thinking about this far too left brain, but you'll get where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had a struggle with, if I as a medium can communicate with your grandfather, then where is and he's just become a drop in the ocean, and there's no delineation to discern his consciousness from every other consciousness that's ever lived. How do you see that?
Okay. I actually had many years ago a dream where this actually more or less happened. What you're saying happened to me in this dream, and I was given these 3 doors that I could have a look in, and one was the past, and one was the present, and one was the future. And we'll get to the future one first because that answers your question really, in a sense. So I went through this door, and it was amazing. It was just, I guess I should say hexagons, right? But it was all, so there were little hexagons, but these amazing colours, this phenomenal light and colours, and they were all joined in. That's what the fabric I was looking at was, this, right? And I was looking at it thinking, this is fantastic. And then I looked down at my hand and I was dissolving into it, which is what you're talking about. I was a drop returning to the ocean, and I was dissolving into it. And I was aware a part of me, I love this part because it's so, for me, it was funny. It was this part that flew off as fast as it could. It was like, oh God, I can't get away from her fast enough, you know. I was a bit sort of like, gee, I'm not that bad. But anyway, here's my hand dissolving into this stuff. And I panicked in the dream. I'm like, oh my God, in a minute this little me, am going to be gone. I'm going to be gone. And this fabulous voice says, no, don't worry. Don't worry. The core pattern of you is stored. And it can call back all the other aspects that formed this me whenever it needs to. So not only is the core pattern of me stored within that fabric, it's still conscious. Otherwise, it wouldn't know that it needed to.
No.
Does that help at all? In fact, so you're seeing that one little drop just turns into the ocean. It does. It does. But that one little drop is the ocean still.
Yes. Well, and so in my meditation one day, I just go in with a question, and that was my question, was the question I asked to you. And the answer that I received was that in your human form, you are a soloist that has come from the choir and stepped forward onto the stage to sing your part, your individuated part for a time. And then when you drop your body, you step back into the choir. And so somehow that helped me, because just from my human construct, it helped me to wrap my head around that even as a part of the choir, I still have the capacity to step forward as a soloist.
Yes.
And share with, through a medium, I can speak to my
loved
ones.
You can. Yes. Yeah. So that's the same answer, really.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your time and your perspective.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I don't have a question. I want to say that I just loved, Kim, the presentation, and I think it's fascinating stuff. And I really like everything you were sharing with us. Very, very interesting, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, Kim, thank you very, very much. It was very interesting, and I appreciate that you have so much information and you've had to really cull it all down, because you and I have had long conversations on this, and I think you've done an excellent job. And yeah, thank you very much for coming along.